Hi, I'm Jeanne Fiorini. Thanks for being here at the Tarot Tips. Today we're going to talk about the tarot rules, things you should and shouldn't do if you're going to be reading tarot. Some of the old, so I'm going to have a set of old rules and some new rules. Some of the older rules come from kind of the folklore tradition, I think, of the tarot and the passing down of both tarot cards and the tarot tradition. The first rule is that the first deck that you have should be given to you. This might have been true when tarot decks were hard to find, or when esoteric wisdom was kind of kept in the background and only people who were deemed wise and responsible enough to deal with it were given the responsibility of the knowledge of it. So should your first tarot deck be given to you these days? I don't think so. If we waited for that, we might be waiting a long time. There are so many resources, so many options. So it's nice if you give a tarot deck as a gift, but don't wait to receive your first one. The second kind of rule of tarot is that they should always be wrapped only in black silk. What I tell my students is that, like any craftsperson, you should treat your tool with respect. So to me, this means if I like to keep my tarot cards in a wooden box and that makes me feel like they're being kept kind of safe and secure, that works for me. If I have a pretty scarf that my Aunt Edna gave me that's, polyester floral, but it's close to my heart, I'm going to wrap my tarot cards in that. So don't get caught up in how you store or in what you store your tarot cards. I think the bottom line there is treat them with respect because they are your tool. Let's see, the third rule that, to me just feels kind of unnecessary is to not let anybody else touch your tarot cards. You might decide to keep, if you have more than one deck, you might decide to have one deck that you just use for yourself and maybe another deck that you use for other people. You might decide, well, if I only have one tarot deck, that you find a way to cleanse them energetically with crystals or putting them out in the sunlight or wrapping them up in a cloth or whatever you might come up with to remove the energy of the previous reading so that they're nice and clean and clear for the next reading. But this idea that nobody else should ever touch your cards, I think it's a personal preference, number one. And secondly, it's really not very practical if you're going to be doing readings for other people. The function or the purpose of this video is less about the old rules and more about, I want to call them rules of thumb. I don't want to say it's a rule because most things are subject when you're working with the tarot. But things to keep in mind, especially when you're reading for other people, that should be, let's call them guidelines or parameters. The first rule is, as a reader, don't expect that you're always going to be right, that you're always going to nail it. This is an impossible goal for anybody, even the best readers among us, for lots of reasons that I'm going to get into. But don't expect that you're always going to mine the gold that's there in the reading. The more important thing, and I may have said this in other tarot readings, my goal when I sit with a client is to have the conversation that's of most benefit to them. If I'm right, that's great. If it serves the purpose of them clarifying what's important to them, that's more important. So don't get caught up on being right or wrong. Try to remember that it's a conversation about what's true, and then go from there. The second rule to remember, or rule of thumb or parameter, is that tarot is not a guessing game, especially when you're reading for other people. You're not there to figure out what's going on with them. You're not there to read their mind. You're not there, worse yet, to tell them what to do. Your job if you're reading for another person, is to most accurately as you can describe the dynamics of the cards that are on the table. Describing the dynamics of the cards that are on the table. If you do that well, then everything else is going to fall into place. There's going to be places where the client can find meaning in that. It's not really your job to assign the meaning. It's your job to describe how the cards feel as a group. Third thought here, third rule of thumb, third parameter would be to don't let the client or the person being read push you around. Don't let them decide the tenor of the reading. Sometimes people will say, well, that doesn't make sense to me, or that's not right. If you're the reader, you've got a couple of options there. You can say to yourself, well, let's maybe ask it a different way. Maybe let's try a different method. If it's not resonating with the person I'm reading for, let's try another avenue. But if you keep getting kind of a similar thing, then it's your responsibility to tell the truth. I'm going to go back to rule number 2, and that is it's your job to describe the dynamics on the card, whether or not the client likes it or wants to hear it. So this idea about telling the truth, about being true to the dynamics of the cards that are on the table, it's going to come down to trusting your guts. And trusting your guts is kind of like trusting your intuition, but it's like one of those word problems in the 8th grade, you know. Trusting your gut is part of intuition. Intuition is bigger, I think, in terms of a definition than trusting your gut, but trusting your gut is very physical. It's very visceral. It makes you want to sit down a little bit harder in your chair. When you want to kind of stick to your guns about the story, that's my story and I'm sticking to it kind of a thing. That's your guts telling you, because intuition can be, you know, kind of up here in your mind, and that doesn't make it bad. It just makes it very ethereal. It makes it very kind of moving and hard to concretize. But your guts will always give you a clearer sense about where you want to stand with an interpretation on the table. So the 3 new rules of tarot, if you want to call it that. Don't expect to always be right. Remember that tarot isn't a guessing game. It's about describing dynamics. And don't let an outside force too much influence what you know intrinsically in your body the cards might be telling you. If you do those things, you'll always be doing a service to yourself and to your client. Hope that's helpful. See you next time.